Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, we have a very, very special edition of our episode. This is our Juneteenth panel. I want to introduce Justin Reese, Jade Mathis, and Riah Greathouse. I'll let them do their own introductions about who they are and their practice areas, but this is our wonderful panel that's going to get into everything we've been probably talking about all year long. So, starting with Justin.
Thank you so much. Gianna, I really appreciate you bringing me on. We've done a couple of these now, and I'm just always honored to be on here and just share some insight with your audience. Just a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Justin Reese. I'm a personal injury attorney. I am based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Outside of doing personal injury law, I also do a little bit of real estate investing.
Beautiful Jade, you're next.
Alrighty. Hello, and I am happy to be back and joining you again. I am Jade Mathis. I'm located in the DMV area. I practice of counsel with the district legal group here. I primarily litigate their civil rights cases, their media civil rights cases, and kind of media consultant for some of their cases. And on the side, outside of law, I am a mental health advocate and an influencer and motivational speaker. And I am excited to get into these topics.
Yes. Last but not least, Riah Greathouse. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So excited to be here. It's my first time joining you, but I appreciate the opportunity. I am Riah Greathouse. I am a personal injury attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, handle primarily and exclusively wrongful death, serious bodily injury cases. Former assistant DA, I've been able to hone my skills in trial work. It's something that I love doing. In fact, I teach a little bit of it, and excited to be here and share some knowledge.
Great. So we're going to jump into our topics. We have a couple of topics for you guys today for this special Juneteenth panel episode. We're going to open up with what they call the case of the century. O.J. Simpson. I know a lot of us on this Zoom, we probably were maybe in the 5th grade, some of us maybe the 6th grade. So we weren't adults, right, when this occurred. But I recall, and I'm not sure why I don't know if y'all were allowed to, they let us watch it at our school. They let us turn it on. I don't know what class I was in, but they allowed us to watch the trial. And I think at the time, being in the DC area, being from Chocolate City, there are racial disparities, but I never really felt it, right? I never really felt threatened by the police at that point in my life. So I didn't know what the big hoopla was about. I didn't know why people were so excited on one side, hoping he was going to get guilty versus the other side, not wanting to not guilty. I don't think I could fully appreciate what was happening. And obviously now as an adult, O.J. Simpson passed away on April 10th, so last month at 76. And so it kind of brought up those feelings again about this, what they call the case of the century. OJ was famous for saying, I'm not Black, I'm OJ. And one of the reasons why he would say that is because he wanted people to look at his talents and his skill set, his intellect. He never wanted to be a Black actor. And he always justified that statement. But I think it's an important statement because just how he didn't want to be viewed as, I'm not Black, I'm OJ. The irony is him being Black is what allowed him to garner the support that I don't even think he would have gotten before. It allowed him to garner the support from Black America. Ahead of OJ, in 1965, they had the Watts riots against the police. In 1991, they had the killing of teenager Latasha. And then 1992, right before the O.J. Simpson trial, you had the Rodney King beating. So you had 3 incidences where it just seemed like Blacks, especially in L.A., were not getting any justice. So when it was his turn to kind of go up on the podium, they were like, we don't care if he doesn't want to be Black or not. He's Black today, and we're going to make sure he gets off, not because he necessarily deserves to get off, but perhaps it kind of seeking justice for others. So I just wanted to, one by one, we can just go in the same order, Justin, Jade, and then Riah. Just your thoughts about just like the case in general, from what you can recall as a child and as an adult, and then what it really meant to Black America, this particular case.
I'll go ahead and get started. I remember when the trial happened, I was in the eighth grade, so I think I might be just a tad bit older than you guys. I was 13, 14 years old at that time. And you know, it was a pivotal moment because I was old enough to understand what happened with Rodney King. You know, my father at that time was a practicing lawyer. He became a judge a little bit later, a few years after that. But, you know, it was one of those moments where I had to, you know, my dad kind of it just resonated, you know, where he had to start kind of having those conversations with me now that I'm becoming older. And I wasn't a small kid either. You know, I was, you know, I played football. You know, I was really big for my age group and could be mistaken as for an older kid. And so I remember, you know, my dad sat me down for the first time and said, you know, his mom gave him the Emmett Till talk, and so he had to give me the Rodney King talk. And that was the first time I can recall you were talking about, you know, those racial disparities. Because prior to that, you know, as a child, you're in this little happy hoopla bubble, you know, where all of my friends are from various ethnic backgrounds and from different cultures, and you're just loving everybody. But the problem is, and I think unfortunately, as we get older, you don't truly realize how much sometimes the outside and the older world doesn't necessarily love you back in the same way as the smaller children do, you know. And it was just one of those pivotal moments where I didn't know, you know, I didn't know for sure like what had happened. I mean, obviously, you know, I was standing on the side with OJ. I'm like, no, you didn't do it. The glove didn't fit. You must have quit. You know, that famous tagline that Johnny Cochran said. But they were playing the trial while we were in school all day, every day. And I was like, you know, at some point, I was like, shouldn't we be learning? Should we be doing some math or something? You know? But sure enough, they had this OJ trial. And but I will say from just a personal standpoint, you know, that is when, because also too, that was also around the same time as Amadou Diallo. Not many people talk about what happened to Amadou Diallo up in was it Cincinnati or New York? I'm drawing a blank, but I think y'all remember he was shot by the police like just an obscene amount of times. It was well into the double digits, and he was pulling out his wallet, you know. And so again, just having those conversations, knowing that as I'm getting older, you know, I'm able to kind of go about, you know, activities with friends, you know, where we get dropped off and you don't have that same parental supervision. It really started to kind of hit home and you see things a little differently, you know, at that point in time.
Jade, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll hop on in. So not only was this just the O.J. Simpson trial, this was a Black man on trial for the murder of a white woman. Let's just keep it real, right? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep it real. And by the way, it wasn't just an ordinary Black man. It was a rich, famous Black man that in those, you know, opportunities afforded him the advantage to go get counsel that someone probably could not have gotten who was not a wealthy, rich, affluent Black man, i.e. Johnny Cochran and Rob Kardashian. So he didn't have to worry about being locked up on bail, right? He didn't have to worry about any of that stuff so I think that's number one, would probably upset white America the most because his victims were white. That's one. We can't overlook that part of it. If it was a Black man, and I think that was not a privilege, that someone who could not use their privilege, people probably would look at it a little different. Also, I think this case was so polarizing because it set the standard kind of, or set boundaries kind of for the influence that the media has over cases, right? Like this case was publicized and probably still to this day is one of the largest cases in American history. And like you said, I think I might have been in the third or fourth grade. They did not let us watch it in Detroit public schools. But when I came home to my grandmother's house, I do remember watching the case. So that as well, I think set the standard or set a precedent for the impact that the news and that the media can have in the legal system in the cases. And just like you said, I think because due to the climate around that time, 1992 riots, because of the Rodney King I think that played a crucial role in the Black people around America and probably all around the world looked at the Los Angeles Police Department as well. And they lost a lot of trust in the Los Angeles Police Department. So it didn't matter what OJ did or what they alleged he did, or if he actually did it. I think by that time, it was more so the Los Angeles Police Department versus OJ Simpson. I think we look at it that way. And I will say that it was so polarizing that I'm from Detroit, so the car capital of the world, of course. And, Ford Motors is there. Y'all, when they took the Ford Bronco away, that was my favorite truck growing up. It was so crazy. They took that truck for 20 years. It just repaired. I said, wow, that OJ case really changed so many things in history, including the Ford Bronco that I always wanted. And I guess the only, I would say, good thing that I think came out of the OJ Simpson case is that we have in court these fancy one-liners that we can use attributed to the wonderful Johnny Cochran. May he rest in peace.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that tip about, we didn't know that they discontinued the car because he was being chased in it. No, we did
They brought
that.
it back. They brought it
They
back.
just brought it back a couple years ago. They did it for 20 years. They got rid of it. Gotta go. Gotta go, OJ. Gotta go.
Well, you can. I mean, look, for those who wanted it, you have to pay a hefty price because there were a lot of companies out there that would refurbish those old Broncos, but they're charging upwards of like the price of an Italian sports car.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they still sell them to this day. I'm not trying to digress too much, but yeah, you can get you a '90s Bronco for like $250,000, completely
Oh, wow.
refurbished.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
All hats off to OJ.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So my take's a little different. In Atlanta, the gift and the curse of being in Atlanta is first thing you think is Black people. There are Black people in Atlanta. I always make a joke that everybody has someone that a relative in Atlanta. You say, "Oh, I have an aunt in Atlanta. I have an uncle in Atlanta." Everybody knows somebody that black in Atlanta. And growing up, and granted, this was prior to the Olympics and everything, still, we were a little bit more progressive as to where we didn't really have the racial tension that you heard about on the West Coast. I mean, my dad was a cop for years. The Atlanta Police Department had a number of Black officers at the time. It was going on. You remember in schools, officer friendly. Did y'all have that in Detroit or New Orleans? Y'all didn't have officer friendly. We had officer friendly.
We probably needed it in Detroit and New Orleans. But
No, we had it. We had it.
You
Remember
did?
that was like before Dare.
Yeah.
That was like before Dare and all that. You had officer friendly or your friendly neighborhood officer. So I remember it wasn't until Mark Furman, y'all remember him, the lead detective, when he got up there and lied, that I was like, yo, cops lied? Like what's going on here? So I think that was personally eye-opening, where you started to see all the prejudice and all the other biases that went into it. But I'll say even more so, what I think that stood out now that didn't back then was that you have this superstar, because OJ was a superstar at the time. And granted, he assembled this dream team of lawyers, but he hired a Black man to represent him. And I think that it's really cool when you look back on it, and it gave us that credibility. I think that's one of the first times that a Black attorney became a household name. So when you look at, you have the racial, a lot of those themes that are going on with the biases and everything against him. But the fact that this man who said, "I'm not Black, I'm OJ," went and hired a Black lawyer, one of the best Black lawyers at the time. And I think that opened the door for so many of us. And in our community, unfortunately, there are a number of us who believe that white is right and would never hire a Black attorney. So I would like to think that because OJ did that at the time, there are people that are like, well, if OJ can do it, then maybe I should hire a Black lawyer. That's not my public defender, and I'm no shade to public defenders by any means, but to voluntarily go out and hire a Black attorney. So that's something that I think that is often overlooked on how that opened the door for so many Black lawyers. And I'll be quick in wrapping this up. Did y'all watch the FX version, the drama series?
I watched that.
Yes.
And I thought that was cool how they actually showed Johnny Cochran's firm, like with this team of Black lawyers that came in, and how they had their war room and they went to work. And if you recall, the white attorneys on there weren't trial attorneys. if you remember Bob Shapiro,
Deal makers.
He wanted to plea him out.
They were deal makers.
Robert Kardashian was what, a trust attorney or probate or bank? It was something that was not even criminal. So I think that that's something that people overlook and don't really talk about. Is I think that was kind of the start, post the civil rights era, to really put Black lawyers back on the map.
I love that you mentioned that. That yes, if anything positive obviously came out of that, I definitely think you can't hear me.
You kind of muffled.
Muffled. Okay. I'm sorry about that. If anything came out of this, like you said, I love that. A Black attorney by the name of Johnny Cochran was really put on the map, and it definitely opened up the doors to future litigators. In fact, in this season, if you guys want to go back, our episode 2 is the infamous Chris Darden. We interviewed Chris Darden. So we actually interviewed Chris Darden 2 months before O.J. Simpson passed on this podcast. So it's interesting. And as soon as he passed, I started to think about some of the things that Chris Darden said about the case. And he actually said something similar to what Jade said. He was like, if I had to do it again, I would never take this case. He was like, I didn't realize the media was going to have that much of a say. I mean, there was no Law and Crime or Court TV or anything like that. In fact, they almost say it was the first reality show. It was like the first time that you could have that level of access. So yeah, it's interesting that even Chris Darden, who prosecuted OJ, who again
he was fighting a losing battle.
I was going to say he was
and he was also the token Black person on the other side. They said that they specifically only had him up there for that reason, to the point the jury kept getting confused, like, what? Where did he come from? Like, because at first they didn't have him up there. Then all of a sudden they pushed him out front. And you have a lot of jurors to this day say, yeah, we were confused why he was even talking and why all of a sudden he took the lead. But it was obvious. They needed someone Black on the other side to combat that there was some sort of like disparity going on. But yeah, I will say this, even though OJ was freed, as you know, I'll close on this note. OJ, 13 years to the date after being found acquitted of murder, was found guilty in Vegas on a robbery charge, right? Supposedly he was just trying to get his memorabilia back with a group of friends, and it obviously went left because they had weapons. But the interesting thing is, and I know Jade and Riah, you guys were former prosecutors, at the most they said, yeah, maybe give somebody maybe 4 to 7 years. This man got he got 33 years. 33 years, which I don't think was a coincidence, because his civil judgment was $33 million that he didn't want to pay. So it's almost like they gave him a year for every $1 million to owe the family.
Absolutely.
And the judge could have did it the day before, the day after, the week before, the week after. No, she chose the anniversary of him being acquitted for murder to render her verdict. That was not an accident. So as much as his dream team did what they needed to do to, not allow him to get guilty and face imprisonment for the murders, he ended up basically getting that sentence anyway, ironically, for this separate unrelated charge. Now, again, he didn't spend 33 years in jail. We know that he ended up spending only a portion of time, I think somewhere like close to 7 to 10 years. But it was just so interesting that they were going to get, white America was going to get their justice one way or another. And they definitely seemed to get it through that Las Vegas verdict. So just wanted to put that tidbit in there, because I know sometimes people forget about that second case where he actually finally served time. And yeah, it was a very full circle moment that happened with OJ. Well, OJ is no longer here with us. So we always tell people to rest in peace. His legacy, whether it be this case or, what he did in sports and entertainment, will always be a part of Black history. And so I definitely wanted to talk about that case because he had just passed away a few weeks ago. Transitioning to our second topic, wanted to talk about another hot topic that's been going on. Now, I will say this, before I say this topic, I personally feel like this is not a shock, but, sometimes people act shocked. But we have all these rumblings between the WNBA and the NBA, and how, they don't make as much. And then you also have, then you also have the point that not just between women and men not making as much in the league. Then you also see a Caitlin Clark, who is an amazing player. I don't think anybody can ever take that away from her. She right out the gate gets a shoe deal. And since there's some players that are just as good as her that's playing for years, not one Black woman in the WNBA has a shoe deal. So I just kind of wanted to briefly talk to you guys about, just what has happened to the WNBA. Obviously, there is a lot of positivity because whether it be Angel Reese, who's a Black player, or Caitlin Clark, like they brought new eyes to college basketball, but then they have now brought those new eyes to the WNBA. I definitely think it's an exciting thing. It's a positive thing. But even with that, we're facing disparities because someone even mentioned, oh well, I think Angel Reese is with Reebok. I'm like, yeah, she's doing like a brand endorsement deal. She does not have her own shoe. Caitlin is the only person, only WNBA that has her own shoe. So I just wanted to talk about those disparities briefly, just because we are coming off of kind of the big season and them starting the WNBA. And I think they may each be on game 1 or 2 about that topic, starting with Justin.
There's actually a lot to unpack here on on this topic in so many different capacities. First thing I want to say is with regards to what is happening in women's basketball, I think they're finally starting to get their flowers, as people say. They're finally starting to truly get the recognition that they really deserve. And a part of that is with this last draft class for the WNBA, because for all the basketball fans out there, and even not the fans, more so even not the basketball fans, people knew all of the star players in women's basketball, college basketball this past year compared to the men who were playing in the NCAA college tournament. And you will hear several sports pundits say the men's tournament was trash, which obviously that's their opinion. And I, in some aspects, even kind of share that because I was watching the women's games way more than I was watching the men's basketball games this past year. And that was attributed to Caitlin Clark. That was attributed to Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, Paige Buckers. I'm able to name a lot of these ladies because that's just how dynamic they were. And I think everything happening with the WNBA, as far as finally they're starting to get more brand endorsement deals and this high-powered draft class they had, it's almost kind of created this perfect storm of momentum for women's basketball that can now be moved, that can now be carried forward to keep it going. Because when we're talking about the pay, disparity between men and women, what people need to understand, it really comes down to TV rights and it comes down to merchandising deals. And that's where the difference is. You look at what the NBA gets compared to the WNBA gets, and that is how you establish these salary caps for which people get paid. It's truly based on revenue at the end of the day. And so when you have a league that's worth several $billion compared to the other league, which might be max now, it just got up to $200 million. That's why the pay is so different. And I'm not sitting here saying that these women don't deserve it, because when you have a woman like Caitlin Clark who has the same range as Steph Curry, you're like, well, wait a minute, she can shoot lights out as well. And I think people need to understand it's not that it shouldn't be like based on, well, they're doing the same job, but it's truly based on revenue. So for those out there, if you want to see your ladies, the women that you cheer for, make more money, then you better be more supportive. Start buying season tickets to these games. Make sure you're tuning in when you're watching TV because they track those ratings. The more people that is watching, the next time they can go back for contract renegotiations, they can go then ask for that money. And then when the money comes in, now the teams can then start to raise those salary caps, and you can see those pay wages start to grow a lot more on the women's side. Now, that's the first part, about pay. With regards to Caitlin Clark and the shoe deal, that is definitely something that is, obviously, out of the ordinary. Now, she did something I thought was, very spectacular. Now she's the NCAA point scoring leader, which, not to take away from all the other ladies who have had very successful careers and were dominant and helped their team win national championships and win games, she did something that was just truly, truly, truly exceptional. Now, I don't necessarily want to always like say just pull the race card per se, but there is something about when you're looking at merchandising and you're looking at brands, and who's buying products, that demographic. Obviously, companies are going to cater to that. At the end of the day, and if they feel that that particular athlete is going to bring in this much more of of a following to purchase these products, they're gonna go where the money is for these big major companies. And so, you have all of the Midwest, not just Iowa. Caitlin Clark is a Midwest girl through and through, so it's not just Iowa that loves her, it's everybody in that region. And not to mention, she's going to be playing professional basketball from the same part of the country where she played college basketball. So for them, I think it just makes sense financially for why they threw that kind of deal at her on top of what she accomplished coming out of college.
But playing devil's advocate,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't Reebok, instead of a brand endorsement deal, just offered her an actual shoe? Because here's the thing, there is no Caitlin without Angel. Angel truly created that dynamic. I think if there was no
Mm-hmm.
one on the other side of it, yeah, Caitlin still would have been great, but I just don't think the same hype would have been there. So I'm just wondering, and I know it just comes down to what companies have to do for the best, but my argument is if she was good enough for a brand endorsement deal, I think Angel would have sold some shoes out. Like
That's
her
fair.
her jersey is already
That's
selling out.
that's
So I
fair.
just feel like the fact that Reebok
That's
did
fair. You can, I think, and it's also based on position as well. So Caitlin Clark plays like one of your more quote unquote exciting positions in basketball. Not to say that the people who bang down on the boards aren't exciting, like your Shaquille O'Neals and stuff like that. But historically, we all love the Kobe Bryants. We all love the Michael Jordans. We all
Score.
love the person. Those are. It's kind of like in football. We all love the quarterback and the wide receiver, but we forget about the big boys who are down in the trenches. It's that position sometimes is just not as sexy. And even if we look at another rivalry, Michael Jordan versus Patrick Ewing, when the Bulls were going against the Knicks back in the day, it was Patrick Ewing who was the man for the Knicks, the big guy down in the middle. Did we know about Patrick Ewing tennis shoes? No, we were all concerned about the Jays. Again, because Mike would shoot them lights out. And I think that's kind of the comparison when you start talking about those dynamics because yeah, Michael Jordan was great, but you had to have, just like in every great story, you got to have your hero and you got to have your, I don't want to call Angel Reese a villain because she's not, but that's kind of how they did shape a little bit of that story with when they were in college. So, that obviously Caitlin Clark got the benefit of being the quote unquote, let's say the hero, of that rivalry. So she kind of got a little bit more of the benefit there.
and that's a great segue to what I was going to ask Jade
Yeah.
about
You know,
how the Black woman was made the villain in the
Mhm.
rivalry and Caitlyn was not. I was going to ask Jade to speak to
I
that.
was just gonna say, well, as a Black woman, I'm gonna go ahead and play the race card. I feel okay playing
Mhm.
the race card. And I think this just goes back to historically how we're viewed and how white women are viewed and marketed as the girl next door. So Black women athletes won't get their rightful share of endorsements because companies don't value their presence or see them as marketable. Let's just be real. Like, so
Yeah.
for instance, Venus and Serena Williams, they have broken so many championships and records, right? And Venus, for instance, in 2000 was the face of Reebok. She signed a 5-year, $45 million deal versus Anna, I don't want to put
And Kornikova.
Anna
Kornikova.
Kova. She signed a
Kornikova.
$6 million deal worth $50 million and never won one tennis major tournament. Listen to that. So I think it's just that has the bigger implication behind it, as we're used to as Black women, is that America just does not see our worth, i.e. these companies, these industries, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to branding, they don't see our worth as being equal to our white counterparts, or not even our counterparts, those that we're actually probably better than. And I think that's just what
Riah.
I mean, Justin, you wrapped it up nicely. I mean, you said much everything there was, so I'm not going to reiterate everything that you just said. But Jay, when you started this segment, there was something specifically that you said that jumped out. You said there, are other players that have been just as good or better in the past. So here's the thing, and even Jade used this word, marketability. It's not about skill, it's about marketability. Companies want what is going to make them money. We're in a capitalist society and they want what sells. They want what caters to the consumer. And whether it's right or wrong, right now in our society, it is the white woman who is selling. Just as Jade said, she's painted as the girl next door. It's the all-American girl. It's the one that people can get behind and root. And that's why she's propped up. But and to give her credit, how many of us are watching college basketball or now the WNBA because of her? And it opened the doors. There are other, as you said, Paige, and there's what's the young lady that steps I think it's his god sister, tall blonde.
Cameron Brink.
Cameron, and I mean, you have these ladies that now they're household names, right? Angel Reese is a household name. Is that your cousin, Justin? Is that your?
No, she's not.
All right, but and whereas sure you can name some of the others from back in the day, Dawn Staley, Lisa Leslie, Rebecca Lobo, all that, but I couldn't name 5 college men's basketball players this year. I can't tell you.
Nope.
So do they deserve more money? Is being the women? Absolutely. But it's not always about what you deserve. Just as Justin said, it's about what the revenue is. So I think that as the revenue increases, then proportionately, so should the WNBA salaries. But I think at one point, mark me if I'm wrong, I think that the NBA actually had to subsidize the WNBA because they were actually running at a loss, right? They were in the red. So when it's really a non-starter when you start to say, well, I think WNBA players and NBA players should be paid the same. No, that's not even close. Do the ladies deserve more than they're getting right now? Absolutely. They deserve a piece of the pie, but that's why I said it's on us as fans, on those of us who are advocates for equal pay in the workplace to say, well, you know what? Let me put my dollars where my mouth is and go out and support, like Justin said. Let me go and buy some season tickets. Let me go, because I've never been to an Atlanta Dream game. I can't even front. I've never thought, I don't even know where they play here. But I can tell you that I'm going to find out. I'm interested in going. When Caitlin Clark's here or Angel Reese is here, I want to know where they play so I can go see. And I think that's contagious. I think that there are going to be a lot of people there. So I'm interested to see what the conversation will look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think, and I'll close this topic with this in terms of some numbers. The average NBA player, so guy player, starting salary is about 1.1 million. So even the worst of the worst of the you walk on the court, you made $1 million, right? You sit on the bench, you make $1 million. Versus the woman, the average starting salary is about $76,000. So that's a huge, but again, it's based on, we understand revenues and things like that. I think what is interesting and why I think you didn't really hear Angel Reese or Caitlin Clark grumbling too much about, they already knew the money was going to be sucky, right? That's why you never really saw them make too many comments. I think they already knew that was it. That was that disparity.
Yeah.
I don't think they care, at least for now, because they went into the league as multimillionaires,
right.
NIL deals, right. Which it wasn't until about 2020 or 2021 when they changed the rule that said that college athletes, because before you could, and if you're listening, you don't know NIL is name, image, and likeness. So anything using your image, your voice, your signature, as a college athlete, you could not monetize that. That's part of the reason why Reggie Bush, which is a whole nother conversation, is getting his Heisman back, because they realized, even though, first of all, they never really proved that he did a pay for play, but even if there was some monetization he did with,
and everybody's doing it now.
Everybody's doing it now. So everybody it's almost silly to hold that over him now. But I say that to say that these women are going beyond their salaries. They are going after name, image, and likeness to earn their millions outside of the salaries. Because to your point, it's going to take several years for their starting salaries to be $1 million, because they're at 76. So to go from 76 to $1 million, there will be some time. I don't think I'm not saying it won't ever happen, but I think until it happens, I think name, image, and likeness is that. You just need to make a name for yourself. You almost have to be an influencer on Instagram, get your own niche, your own brand, and go into the league with some sort of niche. So you're not necessarily relying on your salary. But yes, we will be watching. I think in fact somebody invited me to a game yesterday in LA. I was traveling to go see I think someone, and I was like, well, dang, that would have been a free ticket, but I'm not there. But I thought about exactly what you said, like, oh, I'm actually excited to go. Before I would be like, I ain't going to no WNBA game, but now somebody says it. If certain people are playing, I actually want to go see. So I think the proof is in the pudding. They definitely did something game changing for college sports. They're doing something game changing with the WNBA, and we look forward to these future games between Angel and Caitlin. I know it's definitely going to bring in the views. Switching our topics from sports, still in entertainment, we're going to move a little closer into music and other entertainers and actors. I want to say it was probably, yeah, I guess it was December because I think the act was getting ready to expire. Um, New York has or had legislation that allowed victims that lived in New York, if you were sexually assaulted, you were able to file beyond the statute of limitations, essentially. There was a Victim Act passed, but it was expiring in December of 2022. And so what you saw was right before Christmas, they were like, I swear to God, there were like 15 lawsuits. And it was, I mean, I was exhausted. I was like, okay, I'm gonna come off Shade Room because I'm scared. I'm like, is it gonna be somebody I know? Like, it seemed like everybody was getting a lawsuit, even people that are not famous. I mean, you had even the mayor of New York City got filed for a lawsuit, a sexual assault with one of the people in his police department. That was filed under that same expiring statute. So even the mayor of New York City got hit with this lawsuit under this statute. And so even though there are like actors and you have like the mayor that aren't necessarily in music or entertainment, I would say the majority of the people that got hit with lawsuits because of the statute were in entertainment. The biggest of that name was Diddy, aka Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy. He got some aka Puff. He got about 20 names, right? Brother Love, I think he's down to Brother Love. And so, a lot of media publications has renamed it kind of like this resurgence of like a Me Too, because before that had kind of quieted down. There were a lot of lawsuits with Harvey Weinstein and all these various individuals, and then it kind of got quiet. And then there was this resurgence. Diddy is now a part of 3 or 4 other lawsuits beyond the lawsuit he settled with Cassie, which was also filed because the statute was getting ready to expire. But I do think once he settled it, I think he sat crossing his fingers, hoping, okay, hopefully no one else will file. And obviously that wasn't the case. There were many, many more filings before the statute expired. What are your thoughts on, because I know again, Jade and Riah, I know you guys, were prosecutors and things like that. I know Justin not as much, but what are your just thoughts on, creating these rules, right, that actually allow some people, like the rightful people, to get justice, and then how it could also unfortunately create a bandwagon effect for people that maybe it really didn't happen, but they can just kind of attach themselves to it, like how it's like a double-edged sword when you allow people to kind of go past the statute of limitations for these types of crimes. And actually, I'm going to start it the other way around. We're going to start with Riah, Jade, and then we'll do Justin.
Thank you. So one of the things that people have to understand with the filing of a lawsuit, it's not like you file it and boom, that's it. You still have to prove your case. So it doesn't matter how long ago this happened, you still have to provide the evidence to prove the allegations that are in your complaint. So what I mean by that is, let's say I think it went viral, the complaint that Cassie filed, right? And everybody's like, oh man, these are salacious details. And then everybody takes it as fact and they're like, oh man, Diddy did A, B, and C. But had they not settled that, it would have gone to trial to a jury, and there would have had to be evidence presented and so forth to say whether it was more likely than not that occurred. Because so mind you, this was a civil lawsuit. So in civil, you have a different burden of proof. So in criminal, you'll hear about beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That's a very tough burden to meet. It's not as high in a civil case because criminal, you're talking about jail time or something like that. Civil, usually you want money, so you don't have as high of a standard. So you still have to ultimately prove your case. So I think that the reason you saw so many lawsuits filed, almost a domino effect against Diddy, is because I believe cumulatively these victims or witnesses are now playing off of each other. I believe that a lot of them would be deposed or called in to testify to help build each case, to use each other's allegations against him, to say that it's more likely than not this happened. So I don't think that it's uncommon that you see certain situations like this to help bolster a case. So I do believe that some of these attorneys may have been in collusion or in conversation with each other strategically to figure out how they're going to prove their case against him. So I think that's why you saw the number of suits the way you did.
Yeah, Ryan, I absolutely agree with you. And another thing that I will point out is that as a former prosecutor, as you said, I was a prosecutor for 7 years. So I've done sexual assault cases from everything, sexual assault, drug dealing, traffic, DUI to homicide. And it's not uncommon that victims, particularly in sexual assault cases, it takes them a while to come forward. And then they may not feel comfortable coming forward until they see other people come forward. So they know that they recall and their recollection is exactly how it happened. And that, number one, they're probably more likely to be believed because other people have shared the same experience, but that they weren't kind of hallucinating or something, right? So they may actually have a shot. So sometimes it takes that. So that's why I never take away somebody's experience. Secondly, a lot of these actions, they could rise to the level of civil, but not of criminal. So I think that's a big deciding factor and differentiating factor that a lot of people don't realize as well from the outside looking in. There are two different standards, just like you said, Ryan. There's criminal and then there's going to be civil, and it may not rise to the level of criminality. So some people are saying, well, why didn't they do this and why didn't they do that? That may be a criminal charge. However, the statutes of limitation is completely different for criminal and civil cases. The burden of proof is completely different from civil and criminal cases as well. But I think that's why we have the judicial system, that everyone should have a fair trial or a fair hearing. So that is their experience, that they experience with those individuals. That is their experience. No one can prove them inaccurate or accurate, but the court of law and the judicial system, and that's what it's there for.
Yep.
That's a good segue to what I would like Justin you to comment on. So Riah and Jade talked about how this truly is civil. All these suits are civil. No one's going to jail, even if the worst case scenario, he owes money, right? And his insurance company stick to him because they're not going to keep paying out these claims. I keep telling people, Cassie was paid out of an insurance claim. That money did not come from Diddy's checking account. That's why I think it was almost easy for him to kind of like do it, because it's like, all right, well, we got the insurance. Let's just pay her out. Let's make this go away. What I would like to ask you, Justin, is now that, it seemed like the civil stuff was kind of quieting down. And then a couple of weeks ago, breaking news on every channel. Diddy's houses, in Miami and LA are being raided. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. But to your point, if you read Cassie's complaint, if you even read the recent complaint by his producer, Little Rob, who really just wanted his money, but also put all these other salacious things in there, it's interesting, the lawyers write the complaints as if they're criminal complaints. They talk about human trafficking. Like, it's not an accident. To Riah's point, I think they got together, looked at each other's complaints. They wrote it very
absolutely they did. Absolutely.
This was very strategic.
They even put
very
certain
strategic.
images. I've never seen complaints where you're in bed, the image. I mean, I have never seen complaints written like this in my life, not on the civil side, even for sexual assault cases. So it's interesting that while you're saying one doesn't necessarily rise to the other, how, again, it hasn't happened yet, but it appears that they're going to try to use some of what has been accused of in these civil complaints to make a criminal case. And this is why they got the probable cause, to get the warrant, to at least search these places to find maybe some of the supporting evidence that supports some of these criminal things that were named in these civil complaints. So I just wanted you to speak to that.
Sure. Actually, before I go into that point, I want to go back just a little bit where you talk about with the insurance companies. So for those who are listening in, one of the I thought one of the genius moves that Cassie's attorneys made was filing a lawsuit, not against him individually, but against him as an employer.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that people who have like just very high value, such as Diddy and like some of these other very, very, very high net worth individuals, have usually created like trust and all kind of other legal mechanisms that can almost make themselves what we call in the legal world judgment proof. You know, there's a saying where it's like, I own nothing but control everything. And so what she did and what her attorneys did as far as naming her as an employee of all of these businesses, then they were able to attach the insurance policies that were in place with all of the companies, which were able to help her, you know, get that resolution from a monetary standpoint, which I thought was absolutely genius. Because had she just filed a lawsuit against him individually, it probably wouldn't have turned out pretty well for herself. But segueing into that, one of the things, and I mean, clearly I don't know this for fact, so I'm not going to purport this to be true, but as we know as attorneys, you cannot threaten litigation of criminal litigation when you're trying to do something civil. That'll be the first ticket to getting a bar complaint. And you now have to go in front of the ethics committee. You can't say, if you don't do this, I'm going to have you arrested. But what you can do is you can make allegations that are criminal in nature and say, hey, I would like to try to potentially resolve this. Here's a lawsuit I'm going to prepare to file. I'm not saying this is criminal code this, but these are the allegations based on what my client's recount was. You could take it how you want, but this is what's going to get filed. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was some brainstorming amongst the other attorneys, like you said, how they're putting these very hyper-specific imagery and language in there that could be interpreted as criminal, you know, in their civil complaint. And what they did was genius, because the other side of it too is, we all know, if a judge believes, even if it's civil, if a judge believes that some type of criminal action has taken place, they also have a duty to then pass it down to the district attorney or to the U.S. Attorney's Office and say, hey, I think we might have something more than civil here. You guys have to take a look. So now you're getting other people to do your work for you, in a sense.
Yeah. That's the point. If I could just jump in real quick,
yeah.
That's the perfect point. I've actually seen situations. I mean, we've handled cases and we will write it to mirror the criminal code and our supporting evidence, and it actually does trigger a criminal investigation. And like you said, Justin, you get the government's resources to do your work for you. So I think that was definitely intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Like I said, he, you know, as of the date of this recording, just a legal disclaimer, Diddy has not been charged. So I'll emphasize, he has not been charged with anything. Yes, his residences were raided because there was enough probable cause and a search warrant to say that maybe his residence contained evidence potentially that could support whatever they're looking to charge with. But he has not been charged. His children have not been charged. That did kind of break my heart that, you know, they kind of had, and I know they're not children, but they're like young adults. And I think one of his daughters were there. The way they just kind of came in, which is another conversation for another day. I believe if Diddy was white, I don't think they would have come in. I don't remember them coming even into Trump's place like that, or Epstein's place. I don't ever remember it being so rough. And so I do think it's unfortunate that his Black children, you know, had to experience that alone.
It was militaristic in
nature. Very militaristic, as if, you know, he was like a terrorist. I mean, that's the level that they came in with both houses. So, you know, as of today's recording, there are not any charges. A lot of legal correspondents I've talked to, their expectation is, as long as they're able even to find one thing to prove it, like to Riah's point, beyond a reasonable doubt, because Riah and Jade will say, because they're former prosecutors, you guys don't bring cases that you don't think you can win. It's very rare that a prosecutor is just going to jump out there and say, hey, let's just see what happens. No, prosecutors only bring cases where they can at least win on one of the charges.
And it's unethical. You can't. You still have to do it in good faith. You have to bring it in good faith, where you have somewhat some semblance that you believe you can prove it. I know we keep talking about proof, but that is what trial work is about. It is about proof. So you can't just say, you know what, yeah, I think it, let me just see what they find. There are prosecutors who have done that and have found themselves in trouble with the bar. That is illegal.
I know it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. We always say that.
Right. So if they don't think, based on whatever they found in the homes, it's enough, it'll go quiet again. They will not make any announcement of any charges until they find something. So just keep that in mind, listeners, as you're on Shade Room and Baller Alert and Jasmine Brad and all these, I call them internet attorneys. So there are some real attorneys that get in the comments, and I do appreciate that because they sometimes clear up some things. But you have a lot of internet lawyers who are not actual lawyers commenting and making things, and people just run with it, and they create
Google
TikToks,
Institute.
YouTube videos. And it creates a lot of confusion, and it does get exhausting trying to explain to people on social media, like, that's not quite how it works. So, we will we're going to continue to monitor this case. I obviously, either way, it's not over for him, right? Because even if they never criminally charge him, he still has these other civil cases that are pending that his lawyers are working actively to get dismissed. And so we will continue to monitor what's going on with Diddy and this new Me Too movement of particular cases. I think what Riah said is a great segue to our fourth topic about prosecutors and what you can do and what you cannot do. Currently, right now, we have three prosecutors, or at least have had. Black female prosecutors seem to be under attack in this country. There are three stories that came up in the news, I want to say probably in the last 90 days. And again, I know Riah and Jade, you guys were prosecutors. Just wanted to just briefly talk about, and not to get too much down in the weeds in terms of what they've been accused of, but we have Fani Willis, obviously, with the Trump case. They accused her in Fulton County of having a conflict of interest because she dated someone in her office that's a part of this prosecution. They said just by her dating him, because she's not currently dating him, that created a conflict somehow with Trump. Now, obviously, she was victorious in that. At least at that time, they decided not to take her off the case. He could not work the case anymore, but she was allowed to stay on. But I think recently I saw something a week ago, they may be even reconsidering it. So I'm like, why? Again, I'm thinking, if she was a white woman, would this be handled a little differently? I mean, the fact that her father had to get on the stand and talk about her dating relationships. I mean, her whole personal life was put on the stand for a conflict of interest. Personally, I don't think really ever really existed. So we have Fannie. Then we have Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, who I think in about 8 days she could be sentenced up to 30 to 40 years in federal prison over what appears to be pandemic monies transferred into her own personal accounts during the pandemic, and also her mortgage advisor advising her to have her husband transfer, I think something really nominal, like $5,000 to get an interest rate down or something on her mortgage application. Again, it's very administrative things. I know people that have murdered people that have gotten less time than this, but they are really trying to give this woman, and again, I'm not in the case, so I will preface it with, I don't know what she didn't do. But again, just on the mere surface of the facts, it seems very administrative. At the most, maybe a mistake happened in these applications and transfers. It doesn't sound like there was any intent to defraud. Marilyn Mosby is known for supporting the Tulsa victims. She's known for supporting George Floyd. She is a known prosecutor, and it just breaks my heart that even if she gets through this, her reputation is forever scarred. I'm assuming she would be disbarred. And so they are asking now that Joe Biden, because it is a federal crime, that he just pardon her, because he does have the power to pardon her. So there is a petition on our website, theblacklawyers.com, if you want to learn more about Marilyn Mosby's case. I know a lot of people already knew about Fannie Willis's case, but in terms of Marilyn, she faces a very lengthy sentence if the judge really comes down on her. So again, within 90 days, you had Fannie, you had Marilyn, and then I think 2 weeks ago, you had Kristen Clark from the DOJ under the Biden administration. She had a domestic incident with her husband, where I think his finger was cut or something like that. They expunged her arrest regarding that domestic dispute with her husband. So in her confirmation hearing, when they asked, "Oh, have you ever been arrested?" because it was expunged, she didn't think she had to mention it. And so I don't know who did some digging, somebody that clearly had nothing to do, went back and dug and said, "Well, why did you say you hadn't been arrested if you had this domestic thing with your husband? That's an arrest." So you have people arguing on both sides that, oh, it was expunged. She still should have said something. But needless to say, I think the running theme of what is happening here, it just seems like Black women prosecutors, it just seems very nitpicky. And for them to even ask for Kristen to maybe even step down, I think it's extreme. And so I just wanted to hear, we'll again do Raji and Justin, just your thoughts on what's happening with Black female prosecutors in this country.
Yeah. So to start, let me say this unequivocally. I am friends with Fonnie Willis. So I worked with her. When I was in the DA's office, she was one of my supervisors. I think she is a phenomenal attorney. The woman knows what she's doing. I would never want to be on the other side of the table facing her in trial. But with that said, look, I don't think there's any debate. We can all say it was a lapse of judgment. Should it have happened? Should not? Was it right? Was it wrong? I'm not here to debate that. We all saw it. But the legality of it, does it have any bearing on the case? The answer is no, it doesn't. Is there any conflict? No, it's not. It doesn't change the culpability of, or prejudice any of the defendants in any way. And that's what it's about. Does this prejudice their right to a fair trial? No, it doesn't. So I think what you're seeing, I won't say it's as simple as against the Black woman. I think it's Democrat and Republican. And it just so happens that these Black women are Democrats. And I think that the Republicans are turning around and saying, oh, well, we got you, you screwed up and we're going to hold your feet to the fire and prosecute you to the absolute utmost that we possibly can. Doesn't make it right, but that's the reality of the situation. But I will also say this as a Black man, the fact is, Black man and Black woman, we don't have the luxury of doing what everybody else does. That's just the reality. Especially as a former prosecutor. I remember my first day in the DA's office, I got pulled over by two white Georgia State troopers. And I got a ticket for illegal tent. Just randomly. Got a ticket for illegal tent. Leaving the courthouse. And on it, I politely identified myself. I'm a prosecutor, very polite about it. When I turned over my license, showed him my badge. He said, "Oh, well, you should know better." As he wrote the ticket and drove off. And unfortunately, that's the way they feel. You're a prosecutor. You should know better. It's not right, but it's the reality. So couple that with the fact that you're a Black person and you were once tasked with upholding the law. We don't have the luxury of, yeah, you can call it nitpicky, but that's what it is. You have to almost be perfect. And it's not fair, but it's the life we live. It's what we've signed up for. I mean, look, we're all attorneys. We understand that our work is judged differently than our white counterparts. No, we understand that if we draft a complaint, we don't have the luxury of having typos or spelling errors, or they're automatically going to say, oh, well, it's a Black lawyer. They're subpar or they're less than. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon and just say, man, they're getting railroaded. Maybe they are, but that's just the facts. We can't give them any appearance of impropriety. That's just what it is. It sucks, but it's life.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. And to piggyback on that, by the way, both of Mosby and Fannie Mae also happen to be progressive Black DAs.
Right.
So that goes again, like what you said, with the Democratic versus the Republican Party. And I do think that they're looking at them differently and treating them differently because they are progressive Black district attorneys. I think that's one of them. Also, a lot of people are saying that it appears to be somewhat retaliatory for Marilyn Mosby holding the police accountable for Freddie Gray and her stance against their racist policies on criminal justice issues. I'm not going to say that I disagree with that. And coincidentally, I guess the interesting thing about it is that the prosecutor in this case, her case, the lead prosecutor from the DOJ's office, Leo Wise, he and Mosby have had several run-ins before based on her attempting to hold him accountable for kind of overlooking a lot of civil rights violations for people of color in Baltimore and crimes against people of color. So I'm not going to say that it's a coincidence that, you know, he is on the attack asking for this large amount of time and prosecuting her for this. It kind of reminds me of Kwame Kilpatrick from Detroit. And as we all know, former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, he was sentenced to 28 years. Thank God now he is released, but he was sentenced to 28 years for something that ordinarily may have been minor. And I'm going to say it like they say it, like the rappers say it, like the kids say it. It's cool when they do it. It's a problem when we do it. Like Trump, how many times do we have to say the DOJ has not prosecuted Trump for one financial crime, not one financial crime, but they are dragging Marilyn Mosby for this, for using her own retirement funding, by the way. They are dragging her for that. And to my understanding, prosecutors are asking for upwards of 20 months, which I still think is absolutely excessive. Absolutely excessive for what she's being accused of and what she was convicted of.
No, absolutely. I want to kind of jump in here with regards to we're talking about, just as a whole with these ladies being attacked. You know, Jay, you had mentioned something earlier, and how the media tends, and not tends, they do villainize Black women, especially women of high intellect, women who are making moves and making progress. And with Fannie Mae's case, as we all know, I mean, there's no conflict there. But I think what you have here is the perfect storm. I mean, from the outside looking in, the fact that they have been able to put forth the evidence that they're going to put forth against Trump in Georgia, it's the perfect storm. So how do they defend it? Is to create chaos at the end of the day. And they have this situation where they just got to create mass chaos, because really at the end of the day, that's probably their only best defense, is to create a distraction and to create chaos at the end of the day. And it's distraction for everything. Over here, it's like a good old magic trick. You got all the crowd looking at your left hand while the right hand is doing what the magic is. And so I think that's the situation of what we have here now, at least in that particular case. Now, obviously, with the other ones, this is just a way of villainizing these Black ladies and basically trying to get people to shut up and be scared to do anything at the end of the day, and to not fight as we say, the good fight. And so that is what's been unfortunate. And it's also just sad across the board with Ms. Mosby, what was going on, Marilyn Mosby with her case, because when we look at like these quote unquote financial crimes, some of these financial crime cases are carrying sentences as if you went out and committed mass murder, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not what the law should be intended to on this standpoint. But we know the federal government is a completely different animal in itself, completely different animal. But all I can say is we just need to just keep bringing attention and awareness what's going on. Their stories do not need to be dropped, by the wayside. And people need to know what is happening, so that way we can get behind them and support them, so that way real justice can take place.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry, just one thing that I left out, that I hate that it's being overshadowed, because I can say, Fonnie Willis and Marilyn Mosby, they've done amazing things in their office. They did amazing things. And it's terrible that these amazing lawyers, and I'm not just saying amazing Black lawyers or amazing female lawyers or amazing Black female lawyers. No, they're amazing lawyers, period. Without qualification. They're some of the best and the brightest. And it sucks that there are these ancillary issues that are tainting their legacies. Because as lawyers, they're outstanding. And it's awful. And I really hope that we as a community give them some grace.
And I think that's a great way to end this topic. Like I said, we have petitions on the website regarding getting Joe Biden to actually just go ahead and give her a pardon, regardless of the sentence, whatever it is, whether it's 20 months, 2 years, whatever. We want her pardon. Like you said, at the most, this was a financial mistake. or crime or whatever you want to call it, there's no reason why should be serving hard time with hard criminals for this. It is unfortunate that her legacy has been, at some level marred because of this. And so, yes, we bring these topics up on this particular podcast because sometimes these stories do get kind of pushed to the wayside, and a lot of people don't know what's going on. And the statistic on this podcast is less than 5% of lawyers are Black. Less than 2.5% of lawyers are Black women. We don't take that statistic lightly. So we know that Fannie and Kristen and Marilyn are part of that less than 2.5%. There's really not a lot of us. And the sad thing is, in the last 10 years, that number has not gone up. That less than 2.5% has not gone up, just like the overall 5% has not gone up. If anything, I think last year they said it went down. It was 4.7. So you're not getting a lot of Black women or men becoming attorneys. So the few that we have, that, to your point, Riah, do really, really good work and are just excellent lawyers, period. We don't want to lose them. We don't want to lose them to being disbarred or removed from office or sent to prison over things that, as far as I'm concerned, probably could have been administrative handled and not even gotten this far. But again, when there are racial objectives, but like you said, not just racial objectives, if there are political objectives, like Justin said, it's a perfect storm. When you have multiple objectives happening at one time, this is when you see these harsh sentencing. This is when you see these harsh trials of our Black prosecutors. And so, yes, theblacklawyers.com, the website will have Maryland's petition. We are going to stay closely. In fact, we're getting ready to interview Angela Rice. So I know she is a big advocate of Maryland in this case. So we will be monitoring, like I said, this case very closely in terms of the result of her sentencing. And we're hoping that President Joe Biden does the right thing and pardons her because he has the ability to do so. Which leads to our last topic for the panel. We finally got to our last topic. Speaking of the presidency and people being in charge of rules, we have reparations that comes up every couple of years. People talk about reparations and then it kind of gets quiet, right? And I think a lot of times it gets quiet because we don't really even know how, it could happen, right? Like, okay, yes, Black people literally built this country with their hands. They should be compensated, but how do we decide who gets it and who doesn't? And so I know the state of California is actually in the lead. It is probably the closest state right now to creating some sort of reparations for their particular residents. But then I want to say a couple of months ago, New York is right behind California in terms of passing some sort of legislation. I personally feel like it needs to be federal. I don't think it should be state by state. I think, because what you'll do is you may try to have people moving to certain states to, take advantage of it. So my right, sign me up for my check, right? So like I said, I don't think, well, I think it's great that California, New York, and the lead. I do think for this to work, I do personally think it should be federal, so it's across the board. And I'm not trying to be funny. They create a COVID credit. They create all these credits. You can create some sort of one-time payment or some sort of credit within the taxes where this can be done. I don't think it's impossible. I think there just has to be a desire to do it uniformly. And will it ever happen in our lifetime? I don't know. But I did want to just hear your thoughts, and we'll go back in the reverse order for this last topic in terms of your thoughts on reparations and how it should be done. Because like I said, in New York, there was a big argument that well, you have to be a direct descendant of slaves. Like if you African and you had no people over here tending the fields, nah, y'all don't get no credit. If you Caribbean, nope, you Caribbean, no. It has to be African. Like you have to be a direct.
Gotta prove you have some slaves in your family.
If you don't have no slaves, if everybody else in your family was chilling in Africa or chilling in the Caribbean, whatever, you don't get it. And a lot of people are upset about that, especially in New York, because there's such a high African and Caribbean Black population. But a lot of those people did not have slaves in the United States work in the field. So that's one of the ways that New York is thinking about making the distinction. You have to be a direct descendant. So, we shall see. But this is our last topic. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on reparations, starting with Justin.
So, first point is I completely agree with you. If it's going to happen, it needs to be federal because we all know not every state has the same amount of money for for it to make sense in any capacity. There are states out there that have way more money than others. I wish Louisiana was doing a lot better, but we got some work to do. So us little Gulf Coast states, yeah, we're not in a position to do that. So it would have to definitely be on the federal level. Now, as far as how to implement that, like you said, there's different ways. There's different ways to do it. Like you said, there's be a credit for a couple of years. Me personally, I'd be happy to just not pay taxes for like 5 years. You know, and the money that I would normally spend, on taxes, whatever it is, like that 35% ish, minus deductions for business purposes. If I'm able to just be able to save that and stash that, that would be good enough for me to do other investments and other things that I want to do. So me personally, I have the foresight and the the information and the intellect and the experience to know how to go do that. So I can only speak for myself in that capacity because, the old days where we were originally promised 40 acres and a mule, yeah, there's not enough land space to be given away, to people anymore. So we have to come up with something different. But I personally, I mean, if you give me a tax break for the next 5 years or so, 10 years, I'd be happy with that.
What about you, Jay? You want a tax break, or do you
That's
have
smart.
do you
And
have a
not only do
dollar
I want
amount?
my tax break, in addition, I agree with both of you all, some type of federal bill. I think Congress implementing some type of federal national task force, as they do with other issues. I think that could be one way to implement that. Also addressing systematic inequalities and injustices as a result of the failure and the lack of giving us those resources, right? So criminal justice reform, looking at that from a different stance, going back to look at some of those cases and the war on drugs, all of that stuff needs reparations in a different, that could be a form of reparations as well, particularly now that cannabis is legalized in most jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we already know how we were mistreated historically and currently with the mortgages and lendings and having businesses. So even something maybe to the effect of land grants, right? Or resources. I'm willing to accept something like that. They want to say they don't have the money, then they can give us some type of grants or vouchers. I'm willing to accept that.
What's your dollar amount? Do you have a dollar amount? Because every time I ask people off the street, like, just give me a cool $1 million and I won't bother you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I could ever come up with a number, but Riah, do you have a number that would make you comfortable, or do you think it should be like a tax break or?
So I'm going to take the unpopular stance here, and I know somebody in the comments is going to be like, "Well, give me your check then." No, no, no. Look, I don't know that it should be in the form of currency or money. And this
Okay.
is the reason why y'all remember that Dave Chappelle skit. I don't know if y'all remember that, where it was like y'all look at me like y'all don't remember. There's somebody who saw the Dave Chappelle skit and they
Well,
did
When
wait
they
for you
were
to
kind
sit
of
with the
giving
skit.
away
What is
money.
the skit?
Yeah, what's the
they
skit?
did
I think they were giving
tell
away
me where
money,
I'm
right?
going. It was reparations. It was on reparations, and they were giving
Oh,
away money. It was like everybody went to, and they were like, Cadillac, his like the stock for Cadillac, his Escalade has gone through the roof or something like that.
yeah, I do remember
And it's a
that.
joke, but I mean, it's like what I worry about is that it wouldn't have the necessary impact, the generational impact that it needs to have. I would be afraid that, yeah, we get $1 million and that's cool for you, Jay or Jade or Justin and me, and life is better for us. But what about our grandkids and their kids and so forth? Justin, you talked about investments, but I can already tell you there's somebody that was already like, man, I can't wait to think about the first thing I'm gonna do with my million. Shoot, I'm gonna get my mama a new car and a new crib, right? And that's fine. But I've always subscribed to the theory of, teach a man to fish, right? And I think that the way that reparations should be rolled out is you teach the Black community how to fish. There should be no such thing as I have school loans. College should be free. Why? They did it for the American Indian. Why not us? Why are we paying tuition?
Yeah.
Same thing as you said, taxes. Why are we paying taxes? Give me a tax credit. And maybe that can be rolled out over a certain time, that maybe we're at a different, if they don't want to completely wipe our slate clean, then maybe we're at a different tax bracket or tax areas. So I think there are ways that reparations can be done other than just stroking us a check. When you think about the theory, 40 acres and a mule, yeah, that's land so you can work it and farm for yourself. Same concept. Give us the tools to be able to help ourselves for self-help and so forth. Don't just feed us where now we're dependent on the government giving us more and more and more and more. That's what welfare is. And we see that people are still
That
failing.
doesn't work.
They've never come off.
That
And
doesn't work.
just be one more thing, right? And yeah, it sounds good in theory, but I think that we deserve more than just a check. And like you said, how can you quantify it? Quantify me on those intangible things. Give me the life lessons to really, the opportunity to learn a skill set, to go get education, something that really will be life-changing and generational. So that's what I personally think about reparations versus just giving me a check, because what I believe that our ancestors went through, the government does not have enough money to make any of that fair. It's like what I tell some of my clients, there is no amount that they're going to offer us that's really going to justify or compensate for the pain and agony that you've been through. Unfortunately, there are these insurance policy limits, and this is the most you can get. But I don't want you to think that by us accepting this, we're saying that this is all your pain is worth. And I think that's what you're going to run into with reparations. So I'd like to see that commission, as you said, Jay. Let's get something and figure out what we can do on a deeper scale outside of money that's going to really help us.
Well, on that note, I think that that's a perfect way to end the episode. This is why I talk to other people on podcasts, because I like to hear other people's thoughts. Because I'm over here, well, just like write me this check. But you're right. Okay, beyond the check, you're right. There could be some hybrid of. I love the idea of, Black U.S. citizens don't have to, pay the rest of their student loans back, because that really could be generational impact. Like, oh, they get free tuition moving forward from this date. Like, there are ways that it can still be monetized, but not necessarily in the way of just writing someone a check. So, if the legislators, if you're listening to this episode, we have a lot of congressmen that listen to this episode. Hopefully you guys took some notes about some of the things how it could possibly look. I think we are all in a one page that are all one accord that it should be a federal rollout of whatever they decide. We will obviously continue to monitor this reparations conversation. This has been an excellent panel. Just quickly, Justin, where can people find you on social media? And then Jade, and then Riah as well.
Sure. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation with you guys. This was definitely one of the best and one of the most fun. Again, I'm Justin Reese. I'm based in New Orleans, Louisiana at the King Firm. I do personal injury. You can find me on social media, both Instagram and Twitter at the Justin Reese.
Jade,
I am Jade Mathis. I enjoyed being with you all today. You can find me on social media at Jade Mathis Official, Facebook if my people still on Facebook here, Facebook Jade Mathis, and I am of counsel with the District Legal Group in the DMV.
All right, and I am Riah Greathouse. I am the owner of Greathouse Trial Law here in Atlanta, Georgia. You can reach us online, atltriallaw.com, or you can find me on Instagram, Riah_Greathouse.esq. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you. This was awesome, a lot of fun.
Yes, this is our Juneteenth episode, so we hope that you go out. That is our official Freedom Day. As you guys know, here on the Black Lawyers Podcast, we are rooting for everyone Black all year round. So we are especially appreciative of this panel coming in to discuss these various topics that affect our community. You can also find lawyers like Jade, Riah, and Justin. They are highlighted on our directory on theblacklawyers.com. So as Riah said with Johnny Cochran, back in the day, no one knew to hire a Black attorney. There's no excuse now. You have a whole directory of Black attorneys now on theblacklawyers.com. If you're looking for a lawyer for yourself or a loved one, I think all of us on this podcast panel take referrals. So we will find you a lawyer. Just contact us. We appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to this episode. And as always, we're rooting for everyone Black. Take care, everyone.